And welcome to The Watchman. We've reported many times on this show about the decline of free speech in Europe. From Austria to Britain to the Netherlands, we've seen everyone from politicians like Geert Wilders to average citizens like Elizabeth Sabbatesh-Wolff hauled before kangaroo courts on charges of insulting Islam. Their supposed crime was to dare to criticize the growth of radical Islam in Europe. So what does this mean for the future of free speech here in America? Brooke Goldstein is director of the Lawfare Project, an organization dedicated to raising awareness about these free speech issues and how Western legal systems are being used to subvert free speech. She's also the founder and director of the Children's Rights Institute. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But Brooke, first off, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Always great to see you. And for the uninitiated at home, what is lawfare?
Well, you summed it up really perfectly in your intro. It is the use of the law as a weapon of war to silence and punish free speech about issues of national security, and in particular to silence and punish public dialogue about the very real and imminent threat of militant Islam.
Sure, and it seems that this is a trend in Europe, and we've seen politicians like Geert Wilders hauled before courts. Do you see this possibly coming to the U.S.? Is this creeping into America?
It is here already. I mean, for the past 10 years in the United States, despite the fact that we have the protections afforded by the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, we've seen a rise of frivolous and malicious libel lawsuits, we call it libel lawfare, that target anyone who is brave enough to speak openly, to speak critically about militant Islam, about Islamist terrorism, and about their sources of financing. We've seen former members of Congress sued. Congressman Cass Ballinger, for example, was sued by CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which he called a fundraising arm for Hezbollah. CAIR is an unindicted co-conspirator in a Hamas funding trial. Sued Congressman Cass Ballinger in an attempt to silence him as he spoke to his constituents about these issues of national security.
And Brooke, CAIR and ISNA and MAS, this whole alphabet soup of these American Islamist groups, they're some of the biggest practitioners of lawfare, right?
Absolutely, but now we have the complicity of the U.S. federal court system. I'm sure some of your viewers were following the case of Garcia v. Google when the actress in the now infamous so-called anti-Islam YouTube film, Cindy Lee Garcia, tried multiple times to take that film down because she was receiving death threats because of the fatwas issued by the radical Islamist clerics calling for the death of anyone who participated in that film. Finally, she took it to a federal court. She lost at the trial court on appeals. The federal court ordered Google to take down the film in an unprecedented move to silence protected First Amendment free speech expression in this country. And it is very, very troubling.
And Brooke, what's the Obama administration's response to all this? Obviously, with the Innocence of Muslims film that you mentioned, the Obama administration kind of pegged, at first at least, the Benghazi attack on this anti-Islam film. Do they have any response to these various rulings in U.S. courts? Are they saying anything about this?
Unfortunately, if you just look at the plain facts, it seems as though this administration is actively working also to silence free speech. This administration co-sponsored with the Muslim Brotherhood government in Egypt when they were still in power, Human Rights Council Resolution 1618, which is one of the latest series of resolutions coming from the UN that tries to make it unlawful in international law to speak critically about religion, specifically Islamist terrorism. And Human Rights Council Resolution 1618 criticizes the use of the media to condemn religion. And what happened after our ambassador is murdered in Benghazi, after the Al-Qaeda flag is hoisted over our embassy in Egypt? A YouTube film is blamed by this administration as the but-for cause of violence happening thousands of miles away, and we know that was later discredited. FBI officials are being fired for being Islamophobic. The word Islam and Jihad are being redacted from counterterrorism training manuals. And now you have the federal government ordering Google to take down a film that is called so-called anti-Islam film. This is a direct assault on free speech.
And Brooke, a lot of people at home may not know this is happening. That's why it's great we're having this conversation. We have you on. And if things keep going the way they're going, I don't know how many more episodes you'll see of this show with this infringement on free speech. You mentioned the UN. Let's shift to your work with the Children's Rights Institute and what you're doing to expose some very, very dangerous practices by the UN. In specific, UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, it's a taxpayer-funded entity basically, Brooke, some of the work that you've done exposing what they're doing, they're basically inciting Palestinian school children to hate Jews.
Right.
We have a clip right now from a film you produced called Camp Jihad. Let's take a look at what UNRWA, an arm of the UN, is doing. You know, Brooke, unbelievable. These kids are, what, as young as 6 years old? It looked like 7 years old.
Right.
I have a 7-year-old daughter of my own. I think the obvious question is, how is this happening? An official UN arm, official UN programs, how is that happening under the UN aegis?
Since 1950, the United States taxpayer dollars has been going towards funding UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, which is the arm of the United Nations that is tasked with providing aid and education in the West Bank. We've given them over $5 billion since 1950. It is the only agency that is funded by the United States, and there is no audit whatsoever. There is no accountability to where these funds are going.
And this is under Republican, Democrat administrations?
Correct. We conducted a study, and we found that UNRWA schools in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, are teaching innocent Palestinian children to take their own lives as suicide bombers, to revere suicide, homicide, martyrdom, to demonize Jews. They're advocating that, as you saw in the video, that that Israel should be Palestine, an Islamist state from the river to the sea. There is no recognition of the Jewish state, and this is being funded by U.S. taxpayer dollars. So all in all, you can make the argument that our taxpayer dollars are going towards aiding and abetting the premeditated murder of Palestinian children, and even worse, Gaza schools are now run by the UNRWA schools are run by Hamas, the specially designated terrorist group. This is unlawful. Several federal laws are being violated by our continued unbridled funding of UNRWA, and it's absolutely, there's no justification whatsoever for this. You know, we were blamed for creating the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. In 10, 15 years from now, we will be blamed for educating the next generation of suicide bombers in the Palestinian context. That is exactly what is happening here.
What is the UN, if anything, are they saying anything about this, Brooke? Do they have anything to say for themselves?
UNRWA has outright denied that this is going on, which is why we sent experts in to film this so that you could see for yourself from the mouths of the teachers and the students exactly the type of curriculum that's being taught. We've also translated textbooks, and we've done this with the help of the Center for Near East Policy Research, and there are other organizations like Impact SE. All of the research is online, and this is, again, part and parcel of the Palestinian Authority's message that is sent through the television programs, through the schools, by the political leaders, by the religious fatwas. They revere violence. They teach children to revere suicide, homicide, martyrdom, and obviously this is not the path to peace.
Yeah, and this includes obviously the Palestinian Authority, Israel's so-called partner for peace. And folks, pick up Camp Jihad. We just showed you a clip from the film, and I have to say, Brooke, your cutting-edge work in the subject matter goes way back. Your film Martyr, several years ago. I mean, Brooke has been on the ground, folks, in Palestinian areas speaking to terrorists. So you know what's going on from firsthand experience. We appreciate it so much. And also, as an American watching this, and everyone at home watching is saying, okay, my taxpayer dollars are going to fund jihad, literally. What can we do about it, if anything? You
must get in touch with your member of Congress and ask them, why has there not been an audit of UNRWA? Why is there no accountability whatsoever? The mandate to fund UNRWA is coming up for renewal this June 2014. Call your members of Congress. Ask for an audit to be written into the appropriations bill. There must be accountability, if anything, for the sake of these innocent Muslim children who are being taught, who are being subject to this type of child abuse, because really they deserve an education that teaches them to become lawyers, to become doctors, to be productive members of society. Instead, they're now being taught to become suicide, homicide bombers. And it is a crime. It's a form of child abuse.
It is. It's amazing because your work on both ends, Brooke, with the Lawfare Project, with the Children's Rights Institute, it kind of dovetails together. It all kind of comes together, and the end game is bad for us. So thank God for what you're doing. thanks so much for joining us. Check out Camp Jihad, Children's Rights Institute, Lawfare Project. You see the web